Welcome back. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. And the election from last month has now been certified. And that means that we can put it to rest. The Illinois State Board of Elections certifying the results yesterday at their meeting. They had until the 9th to do so. But the midterm general election results now certified. And one thing that's with that is the amendment to the Illinois Constitution that codifies collective bargaining rights, and it prohibits local and state regulations on what can be collectively bargained. So the State Board of Elections Monday approving the official canvass of votes statewide, and it showed that 4.1 million people cast ballots with a voter turnout of just over 51%. That's the fourth lowest midterm turnout in the past 40 years. So midterm elections are different than presidential elections. There's always a much more healthy turnout for presidential elections because people are really interested in who's going to be running the country. So when you have midterm elections, there's not as much turnout, but you still had 51% of registered voters turn out. Now, the proposed labor amendment to the Illinois Constitution, that passed. Final numbers show 58.7% of those voting on the question approved. That fell short of the 60% needed in that particular path towards approval. But the question ultimately did pass, getting 53.4% of all votes cast in the election. So that's another way that constitutional amendments can be ultimately verified by having the turnout be 50% plus one of all the votes cast in the election. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the amendment and the sponsor in the state Senate. I was able to talk with him when they were at the State House, kind of getting his thoughts on the passage of that measure. But one thing I definitely wanted to cover first off is just the overall numbers and some of the other statistics that there were. Again, 51% voter turnout. You've got other statistics showing about 39% of the ballots were cast before Election Day. So again, 39% voted early, about 18% by mail, and 21% early in person. And while we have the statewide elections, you had a governor, lieutenant governor, treasurer, comptroller, and so on. Even U.S. Senate, Democrats swept all of those statewide offices. U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth got nearly 2.3 million votes, winning that race 56.8%. Governor J.B. Pritzker won re-election with 2.2 million votes, or 54.9% of the election. Attorney General Kwame Raoul got 2.2 million votes, winning a three-way race with 54.3% of the vote. Now, in the open Secretary of State seat, Alexi Janulius garnered 2.2 million votes with 54% of the vote. Treasurer Michael Frericks, he won re-election with 2.2 million votes, or about 54.2% of the vote. Comptroller Susana Mendoza, she was the largest vote getter of statewide office holders, winning re-election with more than 2.3 million votes, or 57.8% of the vote. So that's a little bit of an overview of some of the statewide races. Again, Democrats swept all of those, and Republicans looking at where they fell short and where they fell short in the statewide races. But also you have the outcomes being certified for various state house races, state Senate races, congressional seats, and so on. So there's going to be a lot of analysis of those numbers, and Republicans surely are trying to analyze what exactly happened and what their pitfalls were. But let's talk about the Amendment 1 and what Amendment 1 is all about. So the language of the question that was asked of voters, it adds a new section to the Illinois Bill of Rights to guarantee workers the fundamental right to organize and to bargain collectively, to negotiate wages, hours, and working conditions, and to promote their economic welfare and safety at work. Now, sponsor of that question, State Senator Ron Villaraigosa, he's a Democrat out of Chicago. I talked with him briefly out at the Illinois State House when they were in town. Here's some of what he had to say. I'm proud that he was part of this particular measure passing the Illinois General Assembly, but then being asked to voters.
Well, I'm incredibly proud that Amendment 1 has passed. I think it sends a message that in this state we believe in the ability for workers to collectively bargain and organize. I think it also turns a page in our state's history from 7 years ago to now. I think we can finally have an opportunity to turn the page and move forward and acknowledge that we believe in workers' rights. We believe in their ability to collectively, bargain over their wages, their working conditions, their benefits.
Again, Ron Villaraigosa, Democrat from Chicago, talking about the importance of this amendment passing. I also asked him about, what's going to happen with local communities, because we did hear from the Illinois Policy Institute staff attorney Miley Smith about how this is going to cause some problems with local governments and how they negotiate contracts with labor unions. In particular, she said, this is something that's going to ultimately lead to police possibly going against state law like the Safety Act on things like, say, anonymous reports against police, or say the requirements for body cameras. And Senator Villaraigosa talked about the issues. They're just going to have to be dealt with. And moving forward, he believes that the question of controlling certain aspects of labor agreements is very much something that is off limits now. Here's Senator Villaraigosa.
I actually view Amendment 1 as, again, the ability for us to turn the page. As I noted earlier, 15 years, in 2015 and through the last 7 years, we've had robust discussions about right-to-work zones and banning right-to-work. I think those issues are now put to bed. With the voters having spoken, we are now able to move forward clearly and consistently and say we believe in workers' rights to organize and collectively bargain.
So Senator Villaraigosa really kind of dismissing the question of how local communities are supposed to deal with some of those questions and how they advance the taxpayers' interests in this. Because that's something else that ultimately was raised by opposition of Amendment 1 was they say this is going to increase labor costs for local units of government, and that is going to increase the taxpayer cost. Ultimately, though, Villaraigosa happy and satisfied with how this came together. But he talked about watching it on election night, and a lot of us were watching the totals on election night. It was not really clear if indeed there was going to be a victory for Amendment 1 or if it was going to fall short of that 60% threshold, because it was over 60% early and then it dropped down to less than 60%. And then we had to wait a few weeks to actually have some analysis done of the ballots that were cast and whether or not it got over that 50% plus one threshold of all votes cast in the election, not just those cast on that particular question. And we got that certification last night. But Villaraigosa talking about how it was a bit of a rough night watching those numbers come in and not necessarily being clear election night whether the amendment passed.
Well, at first, we knew that there was an overwhelming number of voters that supported it since election day, and it was just a question of the margin and the final numbers. I'll just say that it was an honor. It's been an incredible honor. I'm so proud to have been the sponsor, but by no means am I, the person responsible for this. There are thousands, millions of workers in this state that stood together, that organized, that knocked on doors, made phone calls to ensure that people were educated about what this would mean for their livelihoods and many other livelihoods of the working families across our state.
Now, is he eyeing any other amendments to the Illinois Constitution? Because we do have amendments that have happened. It seems like every 6-7 years or so, we might have an amendment get on the ballot. It might be approved. I mean, we had one a couple of years ago about changing Illinois' flat income tax to a graduated or a progressive income tax, where you got taxed more based on how much money you made. That amendment failed. But before that, years before, the amendment that created created the transportation lockbox, where any funds and taxes for transportation were meant for transportation and couldn't be swept. That passed. So an interesting history that Illinois has with amendments. Any that Ron Villaraigosa is eyeing to try to attempt to get in front of voters?
I think we, first have to digest this one, and, we continue to do the work of the people and balance our budget and continue to advocate for workers' rights.
So, no, he's just making sure that this one is implemented. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk. And coming back, we'll talk about something that happens, I think, too often here in the state of Illinois, and that's lawmakers retiring at the end of their term after an election. So another one has announced their retirement. Stay tuned. We'll get to that. All right, back with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on WMAY. You can chime in live and local at 217-629-7970. You can also find me on social media. Just search Bishop on Air, and we can connect that way. We were talking about the election outcomes, and one lawmaker was running uncontested and won his election. State Senator Jason Berkman, a Republican from Bloomington. And after the certification of the vote yesterday, he announced that he is retiring at the end of his term. And he's making the announcement, he says, to make sure that local Republicans have plenty of time to find a replacement to take his seat in the new General Assembly. He said in a statement that he looks time to spending more time with his family and avoiding phone calls that pull him away. He's got a whole bunch of things going on, and he wants to focus on his family. And it raises the question, though, Berkman, having watched him for the years I've been covering the State House, very much is what Leader Dan McConkey said, a statesman. He was always at the central part of debates on key issues, raising certain questions, being respectful and all of that. But this process, and we even had it here locally with State Representative Tim Butler, of lawmakers winning election, but then announcing they're retiring before the end of their term, leaving for the local party to pick the replacement instead of the voters having their will done. And we see this time and again. I don't know how you curb this. If you maybe have a strict law about triggering special elections anytime there's a retirement, but we see this time and again, election cycle after election cycle, of lawmakers deciding that they're not going to finish out their term, or they're not going to take on the term that they just got elected to. I don't know how to change that, but obvious that it can be a detriment to voters. No question about it. All right, it is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on